Welcome back at 7:21. Now, as the war in Iran continues, prices at the pumps continue to climb. 20% of the world's crude oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, which is at a near standstill, leading to potential supply disruptions. Some countries in the region, like Saudi Arabia, have decreased oil production due to the uncertainties over their ability to export. All of these factors affect the price of a barrel of oil. So with no immediate end in sight to the conflict, there's global concern about what this could mean for consumers. Dan McTeague is the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, and he joins us this morning. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, good to be here, Crystal.
So let's talk about this. I mean, gas was up at over $120 US a barrel at one point. I know it's dropped a little bit since then. This is the highest it's been in 4 years. Have you seen prices like this anytime in recent memory?
I have, but certainly we hit 141 back in 2008, and my job was as busy then as it is today. But these spikes tend to have this positive effect. That's what goes up must come down for a whole host of reasons, economic being the big one. But the other factor is in a country like the United States, which is extraordinarily sensitive to the price of gasoline, not just economically, but politically. It's something where you see things going to $3 and $4 a gallon, usually is an indication the government must change course. And that seems to be what President Trump did yesterday, and signaling that this war may come to an end. And as a result, Crystal, what we're seeing today is the likelihood that we're going to see prices drop. Not overnight, but certainly by Thursday, Friday, we could start to see prices moving down 5 to 6 cents a liter. The reality is that wars like this do have that that ability to spike prices and bring with it a stronger Canadian dollar. We didn't see that this time.
That is interesting. Interesting that the prices respond so quickly to what appears to be, small changes in policy. They went up very quickly. We saw 3 interrupter clause incidents over the past week in Nova Scotia alone. Are other provinces across the country seeing this kind of volatility in their prices of fuel?
Yes, and they get the price increase usually 24 hours after the markets close. So we've seen net since Friday before the attack. I guess that was on the. I'm looking back here and saying the 3rd. Since the 3rd of March, we've seen prices, in fact, move up from $67 a barrel all the way up to, well, about $100 a barrel yesterday, $99 a barrel. We've seen gasoline across Canada move up about 23 cents a liter, and diesel 44 cents a liter. Now, that didn't quite get reflected here in Atlantic Canada because you've only had about, I say only, it's still a big deal. You've had about a 23 cent liter increase for gasoline, and diesel, it's gone up only about 34, 35. So it's impacted the entire continent. It's North America, Europe, everywhere has seen this price spike, and it can have a really damaging ongoing effect, knock-on effect throughout the economy the longer it remains. So concern has always been expressed. Hey, how long is this going to go? If it goes on for a very long period of time, it starts to show up in places where people, even those who don't drive, will start to have to pay more.
Okay, let's talk about that. There's some uncertainty about what is going to happen with the war. Trump was saying yesterday that maybe it's going to be over. Others saying it's going to go on for possibly months. So let's pretend it does go on for a long time. What are we going to see as far as changes in the way that we live?
Well, we're going to see impacts in the price of everything: agricultural, mining, transport, maritime vessels, jet fuel. All of these things had spiked rather dramatically. I should point out, in the case of aviation fuel, it went up like 60 cents a liter. So that sooner or later would start to see companies, transport companies in particular, asking for fuel surcharges, something we haven't seen certainly in several years. That would, of course, then impact the cost of just about everything that we do, regardless of whether or not we use that mode of transport or not. The other factor, and I think it's came up, I mentioned this to your colleague Jonathan McInnes last week when he did an interview. One of the things that countries would do is dip into what's called their petroleum reserve. And of course, that's what happened. The United States has about 395 million barrels. That sounds like a lot. But in fact, it's probably worth about 20 days of reserve. Other G7 nations have a reserve, a physical reserve. Canada doesn't have one because it produces so much. At any given time, it could sort of increase that amount, especially from Western Canada. But that would last maybe 2 to 3 weeks. At which point, then you'd see a major spike in oil prices and ultimately in fuel prices.
All right, you mentioned Canada's supply. We're pretty much out of time, Dan, but I just wanted to mention that 20% of the world's oil comes from that Strait of Hormuz. How much does Canada depend on that as a source for oil?
A little bit. I mean, there are some refineries that use stuff from Iraq, Kuwait, very small amounts, but we pay a global price for our oil, whether it's made here or not. And we pay it in US dollars, which is why this time it was a little bit more painful, because in the past we've always had the petrodollar, Crystal. We've always been able to shield the Canadian public from major increases. Not this time. We need to do something about why the Canadian dollar is so weak. 135 pennies to buy a US dollar. That is 25 cents a liter to the price of gasoline.
Well, Dan, you did a fantastic job of fitting a lot of really valuable information in the little short time we had. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate this. Thanks, Crystal.
Have a great day. We do appreciate your insight. All right, it is now 7:26. We'll take a little break. We'll be back with more of our show right after this.